Welcome to 101. I'm Greg Bassett, your host from the Salisbury Independent newspaper. It's a big day here at PAC 14. We have a friend in the house, James Fisher from the Delmarva Chicken Association. Welcome, James.
Thanks, Greg.
Now, as the pride of Bowdoin College, Brunswick, Maine, welcome to the campus of Salisbury University.
Yes, thank you. You've let slip already. I am not a Delmarva native. I did go to college in Maine, but I have lived on Delmarva since 2003, so I hope that gets me some cred.
Well, and you're smarter than everyone here, so you understand the peninsula in a way that we don't, so that's good.
I challenge the premise, but I love being on Delmarva. I love living here.
So a lot going on in the chicken industry right now. I want to talk about the most recent story that we had in our paper about this ammonia in the air. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, there are no federal standards for how much ammonia can be in our air. There are standards for how much ammonia can be inside of a workplace or inside of a building.
Yep.
But an independent study from a professor at University of Maryland Eastern Shore found that it's not really the problem that we think it is. Now, correct me if I'm misstating this, that we think it is in terms of poultry houses.
So we have heard, everybody's neighbors with somebody on the shore, right? Like chicken growers, people who work for chicken companies, people where I work. We all, have an interest in trying to understand, is chicken farming having any kind of effect on air quality? And so we, DCA, the chicken industry generally, a couple years ago, sort of put forward some funds to get started ambient air monitoring on the Lower Eastern Shore. And you're right that there is actually no federal standard for ammonia. So like the EPA doesn't really support a network of ammonia monitoring around the country. They do for other kinds of, air emissions, but not ammonia. But we know that ammonia is sort of one of the byproducts that when you go by a chicken house, some of what you smell is ammonia. So we want to know the answers to that question just like anybody else. So we support this sampling that's conducted by the Maryland Environmental Regulatory Agency. This is something where the chicken industry has no contact with these monitors. We don't collect the data. All we did was, put forward some funding to get it off the ground. And these have been running, I think, for more than 3 years now. And so while there is no federal standard, there is sort of a couple generally accepted levels where if the air ammonia level is above this level for a long time, you might want to take steps to change it. So that number is 350 parts per billion. And what we're finding is that around the shore in various locations, one of them near some chicken houses, one of them near a lot of chicken houses, that level on average kind of never goes above 50 or 60, even at the site with a lot of chicken houses. There are days when it dips down, there are days when it's up, but it's nowhere near this 350 parts per billion average. So that's heartening.
Right.
It doesn't mean that we just close up shop and go home and say, okay, we're done. This monitoring is ongoing. We want to gather a lot of data about this because there's always been a lot of questions about it. There hasn't been a lot of data around it. So we wanted to get started that slow but scientific process of gathering this data. So that's what's going on, supported by us to give it that boost, and then we step back and say, this is an independent project that the state is conducting, but we wanted to make sure it got underway.
And it's most important to me as a reporter because it puts this stuff in context. Because I'll interview people who will say, my child is affected by the ammonia from the poultry house next door, right, and this stuff needs to be banned. Yeah. And I'm very sympathetic with that, and I want to report that, but I don't know what's true and not true. If the child really is affected by the ammonia or something else is going on. So sometimes these studies really put things in a proper context so we can explain to readers what solutions there might be.
Right. It's interesting. I think people often think about both water and air pollution in context with chicken houses because chicken houses are very large and you can see them on the ground, right? But on one of the days when literally the day when ammonia kind of spiked a little bit, got over the average, we noticed that, and MDE sort of did some looking on what was going on in the area that day. And what they found, that was out of the ordinary for that day was that chemical fertilizer, not chicken manure, but a chemical fertilizer with phosphorus and nitrogen on it, was being applied to a nearby farm field
completely
that
separate
very day.
Thing. Yeah.
So that's actually, a source of nutrients on the land that is the opposite of chicken manure. Chicken manure can be a great organic plant food on a large scale. If you're a farmer, a grain farmer, it can provide organic matter in nitrogen and phosphorus. But if you don't want to use chicken manure, you can use a chemical fertilizer. And there may be applications where that makes more sense for you. But on one of these big spiky days around one of these sensors, that was what was going on. It wasn't that a chicken house opened its doors for a clean out.
Right.
It was the exact opposite. So that's, good to know. That's not going to be the answer every single time. But I think, it's people don't often think about the other ways that fertilizers get applied to the land of Delmarva, and it's not always chicken manure. Sometimes it's something that's actually in competition in the marketplace for fertilizer.
So many people think of it as a waste, like it needs to be gotten rid of. But for the farmers, it's valuable. It's a tool, and they get paid for it. And then they want to protect their rights to their own chicken manure.
Yeah, chicken manure is actually in more demand right now than we have supply. So Delmarva Chicken Association a couple years ago decided we weren't Silicon Valley enough. And so we created an app, kind of like the Craigslist of litter. So this is a smartphone app where if you have chicken litter, if you're a chicken farmer, you have a couple tons of chicken litter that you want to sell because it has a value in the marketplace. You post on this app that, hey, I got some litter, who wants it? And if you're in the market for it, if you're growing soybeans or corn, a lot of our litter goes up to Pennsylvania to be mushroom substrate. So you can post there, you can search and say, I want to obtain some litter. There's a lot more buyers than sellers on that app right now. It's not the case that we have more litter than we know what to do with. Litter is scarce and it's in demand because it's this relatively low cost, organic, locally produced plant food. Right.
And now look where we are in terms of the buffer zones, the cover crops that are planted, and that the manure has to be kept in sheds.
Yeah.
That's all stuff that your organization helped lead to get farmers to buy into.
There's a lot has changed since the 1980s, right? When the area's focus really honed in on the Chesapeake Bay and the Eastern Shore bays and their water quality. One of the longest time chicken growers that I know who lived in that earlier area and who's still farming today says, today farming chickens is like farming in a crime scene. Every nutrient is tagged and accounted for. There's no ability if you're a chicken grower to just say, well, I'm just going to pollute a little bit. My permit has a little bit of pollution wiggle room. It doesn't have any pollution wiggle room. Like if you're a chicken grower, the assumption of your water quality permit is that you're sending zero nutrients to nearby waterways. Now it allows for the fact that if there's a 1 in 100-year rain event, maybe your manure cover gets overwhelmed, and so there might be some on an unusual occasion. And it allows for the possibility of that and requires you to take steps to mitigate it. But there is no default setting where a little bit of nutrient runoff is allowed on a chicken farm. The standard setting is zero. And that's something that now a generation of growers has grown up with and sees as the standard. And I think that's one of the reasons why we know and scientists know that agriculture as a whole industry and sector in the Bay is sending fewer nutrients than it used to. Did it start from a relatively high level? It did. But that trend is going down as the trend of nutrients that developed areas, suburbs, cities, Walmart parking lots, everything is slowly going up from a lower baseline.
Right.
So, everybody's goal, I think, in the Bay is to have both of those trending down. Unfortunately, that's not where we are. Agriculture is trending down from its higher peak and going in the right direction. The developed areas started at a lower level that seemed manageable, but unfortunately are climbing up slowly. And we got to reverse that trend and continue the progress in ag. I think that's the key to unlocking the benefits for the Bay that we all want to see.
But the easiest thing to do socially is just point at the chicken house.
It's highly visible. It's highly smellable. Although less so, I would say, than the 80s. I think if you asked anybody who's lived on the shore for 50 years,
completely
did the shore smell different in 1981
different, yeah.
than in 2021? I think they would have to say yes. Because, and that's not an accident. We've gotten better about managing litter. We've gotten better about understanding what we feed these chickens to, lower the nutrients in what they put out the other end. And that's been good for the environment. It's been good just for the air quality in the chicken houses. I mean, I just was stepping in a chicken house yesterday, giving a reporter a tour. And, it smelled a little earthy, but it didn't knock anybody over. It was really a much more pleasant smell than generations ago. And there's been a lot of hard work to get to that point.
In recent years, there's been this debate about the factory farms versus the small integrators who, or the growers who interact with the integrators. The so-called CAFO issue, the multiple chicken houses. Where are we on that track?
Have grocery stores gotten smaller over time? Right? I mean, it's the same benefits of scale that apply to the retail part of food, where if you operate a larger enterprise, you are able to absorb some of the fixed costs. The truck is going to come to you, and you're going to have to pay a certain amount to ship your products around the country. But if you can spread that cost out through larger businesses, more sales, you can lower your cost of doing business and be more efficient, more profitable. So the same effects that drive that on the sell side also drive it on the production side. So every year, we track at our trade association, we track how many growers are there, how many chicken houses are in operation. There are fewer growers operating every year, basically. It maybe once in a while it dips up a little bit, but there's fewer chicken growers today than there were 20 years ago. Most years when we measure it, there are fewer chicken houses in operation. The houses are somewhat larger and the operations are more efficient. So that's something that makes sense for every grower. If you have to buy a certain amount of land, you have to invest in stormwater management, you have to invest in the equipment that it requires to raise chickens. Everything about that incentivizes you. If you're going to build 3 houses, well, if I build 4, I've got all these fixed costs anyway. I have to buy all this stuff. If I build a 4th house, it's more profitable for me. I can better support my family. So that's why that happens. I think people kind of romanticize, a small farm, but I don't think that people would support the use of resources that would be necessary to support a network of very small farms. There would have to be more farms. They would take up land that on Delmarva is now being used for housing and businesses. We know that in 1965, it took a lot more resources per bird to raise chicken than it does today. We've spent more fuel per bird. We used more water. We spread out over more land. So the way that the chicken community is shaped today allows us to produce more chicken with fewer resources on less area, with less fossil fuels, less water, less feed. That's what people have asked us to do, because it also allows us to make chicken more affordable. And I think, during and since the pandemic, we've definitely focused on the cost of the chicken that we buy. And that's been, if we had a network of really, really small farms, chicken would be more expensive than it is today.
People eat more chicken than anyone ever imagined.
Yep. I mean, my organization, we used to think our job was convincing Americans to give chicken a try.
Right.
We used to have a whole department that would teach them how to cook it, why they might want to consider adding it to their grocery list. I mean, those days are long in the past. Americans decided chicken's great, so we're not chicken marketers. We're not in trying to change anybody's mind. If I meet someone who says, "Oh, I'm a vegetarian," I said, "It's great. I'm glad you have menus and foods that you like." It's not at all my job to try to convince you to eat chicken. I'm not even going to try.
Yeah. So many great innovations that Purdue Farms had in terms of growing the chickens, but also in how to prepare and cook the chicken.
Yep.
It's just amazing to me.
Yep. I will say, though, that the diversity of people who are chicken growers is still fascinating to me. I meet growers who are multi-generational, whose parents and grandparents grew chickens, and they grow chickens now. But I also meet growers for whom raising chickens is like a second really interesting career for them. Maybe they had been, in school administration. Maybe they retired early from a career in public safety for police or fire. And they've decided, okay, I'm 48, I retired, I'm not done. I don't want to be done working. I want to try something different. I also meet growers for whom this job is their first job in the United States. I meet growers from Vietnam and from Korea who chose to come to the U.S. because they had family who tried this and who wrote back and said, this is a way to like make it in America. And that I find that really heartening. We know that chicken farming on Delmarva is more diverse in terms of backgrounds than your average American farmer. You're more likely to be a woman. You're more likely to, speak a language other than English. And those growers have developed, great communities here on the shore. We're working really hard to get them more involved in our organization. We translate a lot of our materials into Vietnamese and Korean and Urdu to make sure that we are reaching those growers where they are and getting them incorporated into the larger Delmarva chicken community.
One of the things I look forward to every year is you give the awards to the chicken growers. Delmarva Chicken Association does a great job, and you tell these little stories, nice little photos of people on their farm.
Yeah.
And I look forward to that because it's these little snapshots of what their lives are like and how much they appreciate what they're doing, how hard they work. Do a great job with that. I really appreciate that.
It's the most fun 2 months of the year for me, and I'm about to start it. I'm about to start making those calls and saying, hey, this is your life. You're an outstanding grower. It's so fun. I really enjoy it. And I have to say, I'm a former reporter. You're a former newspaper editor.
Yeah.
And the newspaper family that we both worked for at one time helped get me the skills in like doing little videos on the smartphone and editing them and doing sort of short form video. And that's something that's carried over, and I love being able to do that in this job and tell those stories, let them tell their stories in their own words.
These are real people in our community. This is what they're doing. It's great stuff that they're doing to supply the food network for us.
I mean, 2% or less of Americans are farmers. This is something that's changed a lot about, our way of life over the years, but that makes, I think, telling those stories even more important because, in my grandparents' generation, it was common to know a farmer, and it isn't anymore. Most people probably don't personally know someone who produces food for a living, and that's, even with, the ability to check your chicken house fans on your smartphone, it's still a very different way of life and a very different career than most of us have, and I love being able to share what that's all about.
Another big controversy recently was here in Wycomico County with this slurry tank out in Hebron, Mardella. This thing collects stuff from chicken farms, grease from restaurants, all kinds of stuff go into this thing. And it's turned into a nutrient that farmers can use.
Yep.
One of those neighborhood complaints, odor, flies, issues. County tried to ignore it for a while. Then they proposed legislation to try to curb it. And again, it was a mindset thing. Is this stuff like a toxic waste? Is it an asset? What is it?
Yeah.
And you all took the point of view that it was an asset because that's how farmers see it.
Yep.
And that's been controversial. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, on a technical level, it's not a hazardous waste. The state of Maryland doesn't consider it hazardous waste.
Actually, there was a spill there recently.
Yep.
And no one could turn out to fix it because it wasn't a hazardous waste.
Right. Well, the company that produces it and sends it to the tank did, come out immediately and start cleaning it up. And that nobody wants a tank to spill. Like that's not a good outcome. I'm sure everybody involved is looking at that and say, how can we, prevent that from ever happening again? It's also, even before the county, took its policy decision, it was very unlikely that anyone was going to try to build another of these tanks. The main reason is that I think there's some exciting investment in areas that can dispose of this material, this DAF, dissolved air flotation material, that can kind of dispose of it in a different way through anaerobic digestion. So basically you can take it in an enclosed tank process and make natural gas out of it as a utility grade power. So there's two companies on the shore that are working through the permitting and intend to build facilities that can do that.
So the technology will make it obsolete fairly quickly, perhaps.
This is one of those things, where Europe is further along than we are in developing and using this technology. This is anaerobic digestion is something that's fairly common in the sort of, stream of byproducts to energy and back in European agriculture. So this is something that, I think it would be useful to bring to America. These are the kinds of things where farms have experimented with this, like on a farm scale. Like, there's been funding from various entities for one or two farms to try things like this. And they always struggle, I think, because the scale is small. But like we talked about with, making chicken farms bigger, like there are advantages in collecting this from, a couple hundred farms instead of one farm.
Right.
If you're going to build this whole expensive thing, let's build it to a larger scale where you can make the costs and benefits work. So I think we're really excited to see where those go. Before they're built, though, I mean, this material is helpful on fields the same way chicken litter is helpful on fields. There's less of it. I mean, it's not, there's chicken litter is more available than this is. And I think everybody wants to, work with neighbors and to be as little of a nuisance as possible. No one wants this to be a thorn in anybody's side, and certainly no one wants to see it spilled. But this is something where, there isn't going to be some massive increase in this stuff. No one's going to build a new processing plant on Delmarva and start generating a whole nother pile of it. So, it's something that can be addressed, and the anaerobic digestion piece, when that comes online, I think is going to, do even more to solve it.
Yeah, and the politics on that, and I don't mean Democrat, Republican politics, the politics in terms of, even the Farm Bureau said this makes farmers look bad. We can't support this thing. But you guys were able to articulate the position that it is a valuable resource and that the farmers have a right to this.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and I think, we're following what the Maryland, this isn't a new substance,
Right.
This isn't something that dropped out of the sky and regulators said, oh, we have no idea how to deal with this. I mean, this is something that, the Maryland nutrient management regulations have, incorporated for a while. And I think a lot of these issues come about because of the way Delmarva is changing, right? I mean, Delmarva's growth in terms of residents and businesses is, amazing over my 20 years here. And you've, from your perspective, has got to be even more amazing to see how this area has changed, how it's grown. Someone asked us at DCA recently, if the chicken industry weren't here, what would Delmarva look like? And I think our answer is it would kind of look like most of New Jersey.
It'd be Long Island.
It would Long Island, where my wife is from.
Yeah.
It would be, we would have a different area. We would, we would not have any pockets of agriculture without chicken. It would just be all development. That would be a choice. But I'm happy that that's not the case for now.
Let's talk about something fun. In October,
Yes.
we have an event coming back.
Oh, we do. We have the Delmarva Chicken Festival returning.
It's my favorite thing of the year for years growing up.
So
I used to go to all, even when it was in Dover, I went up there.
I'm gonna have to raid your photo albums for social media as we get close to October 7th.
As a reporter, I loved it. But anyway, October 7th, it's going to be in
October 7th,
Salisbury.
Here in Salisbury at Purdue Stadium.
One day.
This is a one-day festival. I know it used to last like 2 or 3 days, right?
Felt like 10 days, but yes.
So the very first Delmarva Chicken Festival in 1948 included like a beauty pageant in Easton,
Yeah.
and a parade in Georgetown,
Yeah.
and kind of far flung. And in this event, it used to rotate around the shore.
Yeah.
It would be in Pocomoke one year, and Easton the next. This is going to be a one-day event from 1 to 7 p.m. October 7th at Purdue Stadium. It's going to be free. It's going to be open to the public. Very family-friendly. Live music, entertainment, food and drink. We're inviting a ton of food trucks to come. Leaning on the chicken, but not your only option for menus, obviously. We're going to have these chicken caper games where it's like field day competitions between the chicken companies. Is Purdue or Allen Harim better at tug of war? We're going to find out. I'm excited. And a chicken picking contest.
Right now, I remember Frank Purdue used to do the eviscerating contest,
Yeah.
and he would beat everybody in that thing.
He told me that. He had not lost the touch. That's exciting.
Just that the chairman of a multi-billion-dollar corporation could get up there and beat people whose jobs it was.
I mean,
They might have been slowing down since the boss was leading it, but who knows?
Oh, I don't think so. I mean, this is a business for people who are competitive people.
Yeah.
Right? Like these are not type B folks in chicken, so I'm sure they wanted to win. That would be great bragging rights to beat Frank at chicken picking would be pretty amazing.
Now, there is bad news with this, and people seize on this, and I don't know why, but you're not going to have the giant frying pan.
We are not going to have the 10-foot diameter, 250-pound iron fry pan.
Because it's in a
Sadly.
museum somewhere.
It is. It's in a museum in Georgetown, Delaware, in the Marvel Museum.
Okay.
It's standing up on its side. If you want to roll it down 113, I encourage you to try. But I don't want to do that. We did call the museum. We said, "Is there any way to like helicopter this thing out and put it, bring it to the stadium?" They said, "We love you guys, but no."
Yeah. But you're still going to have the ones that we're more used to, the big cooking areas, so there'll be plenty of chicken to eat at this event.
I think we have the Lions committed to come
Yeah.
cook fried chicken for us, and as I say, a bunch of food trucks. So you will not leave hungry, not at all.
And this is to celebrate the 100th anniversary?
This is the 100th anniversary of the chicken industry on Delmarva. You must know the story of Cecile Steele.
I do.
Do you want to tell the story of Cecile
No,
Steele?
well, she had layer chickens, but there was a screw up in the ordering. But you tell it. Yeah.
So this was in 1923. Cecile Steele, an Ocean View, Delaware homemaker. Husband worked for the Coast Guard in Bethany Beach. And she ordered her standard 50 chicks to have on the farm, to have eggs around. By mistake, her Dagsboro hatchery sent her 500. They added a 0 to the ledger. And instead of panicking, she and her husband Wilmer quickly built enough housing to raise these chickens for 19 weeks, which would be like 3 flocks worth today
Right.
of time, almost half the year. But they sold them to end up in fancy hotels in Wilmington and Philly for what in today's dollars would be like $11 a pound. I mean,
Right.
they sold chicken for filet mignon money.
Right.
So the next time she ordered 1,000 on purpose.
Right.
She literally was America's first broiler chicken grower, by design. And that was in 1923. So we've been growing for 100 years on Delmarva. We are celebrating that with a PR campaign, and I'm visiting every Ruritan club I can get my hands on to tell this story, because it's a really fun story, and this festival is part of that.
And so much coincidence is involved with the Purdue family. Certainly, they started Purdue in 1920 as an egg company.
As a hatchery, right?
With other things they did. Frank was born in 1920. Then Cecile gets traction in 23.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden there's this huge industry.
It takes off. We're a rural area fairly close to some major markets. That helped. We're kind of right now we're the northernmost area that does produce chickens. Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama. Those are actually like the states that produce more chicken than we do. But I would say we punch above our weight because we're a small region.
Right.
And we do a lot. And we're the closest to area you can buy chickens from: New York, Philly, Boston, all those areas.
Yeah, and truck farming was our thing here for so long. But the one thing left in truck farming still is the poultry.
Yes. It's
There are 1 billion chickens right now in Sussex County, Delaware.
we produce 600 million chickens a year on Delmarva.
Yeah.
I used to, before I worked for this job, I used to hear, "Oh, there are more chickens than people," and I thought, "Oh, that's interesting. It must be close." It's not.
Not close at all.
It's not at all close.
All right, Chicken Festival again is Saturday, October
7th from
Okay.
1 to 7 p.m. Yeah, stay through the end. You'll get a lovely fireworks show out of it. It's free parking, free attendance. Won't cost you a dime except for what you buy.
How can people reach you in Delmarva Chicken Association?
They can look us up on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. They can find us at dcachicken.com. If they are a vendor, they might be interested in taking part of the Chicken Festival, they can reach out to us at dcachicken.com, and we'll get their information. We'll send them what they need to know.
He's James Fisher. He's from the Delmarva Chicken Association. We're thrilled he had time to be here today to talk about poultry, one of our most important topics here on Delmarva. Thanks for being here, James.
It was a lot of fun, Greg. Thanks for having me.
I'm Greg Bassett from the Salisbury Independent newspaper. Another Chicken 101 right here on Pack 14.